So Robert Peel did a good diagnosis of the problem and found a solution. The solution was very easy. Let us require bankers to keep a 100% reserve requirement on the certificate of deposits, paper banknotes they are issuing. And this was the main the tenet, the main point of Peel's Bank Act. So in Peel's Bank Act, it was established that from then on, you could only issue banknotes, paper banknotes, exactly in the same amount of the gold originally deposited in the bank. This was established, as a matter of fact, for the Bank of England, which was the most important private bank in England. The law was even more demanding for the other private banks, establishing an overall absolute limit to the amount of paper banknotes they could issue. And a lot of, hopes were put in this legislation. English citizens thought that from them on all the problems would be solved. No more bubbles and bursts, no more cycles of economic financial exuberance and recession would be repeated. But notwithstanding all the good hopes put into this legislation was a huge failure. Why it was a huge failure? Very easy. It's very easy to understand. Because the legislation did forget to require exactly the same, the 100% reserve requirement, not only for deposits, which was what was established in the law, but also to the deposits of gold, but also to demand deposits. That's a very important point. From then on, from the Peel's Bank Act, it was forbidden to print more paper banknotes than the gold originally deposited. But the legislation forgot to require the same for demand deposits. Why the legislation forgot to demand this 100% requirement for demand deposits? Just for one reason. In those days, in the first third of the 19th century, economic theoreticians did forget something that was discovered 300 years earlier by the scholastics of the School of Salamanca. The scholastics of the School of Salamanca in the 16th century already discovered that demand deposits in a bank do behave exactly the same way as banknotes, are part of the monetary supply exactly the same way as paper bills. They called it chirographis pecuniarum in Latin, which means in English pecuniarum, money, chirographis, written money. Those bank entries in the accounting books of bankers are money exactly the same as banknotes, paper banknotes, or gold. But this was forgotten. And as a matter of fact, I will tell you that economic theorists did not agree among themselves, among ourselves, that bank deposits are part of the monetary supply till the beginning of the 20th century, almost yesterday. And this is a huge pity, because against all the good hopes of Peel's legislation, this legislation was a failure. Since 1844, what bankers did was very easy. They just redirected their business from the business of over-issuing paper banknotes to exactly the same, from the theoretical point of view, business of issuing deposits, demand deposits. So if you remember your first lessons of accounting, you will remember, the asset side and the liability side in the balance sheet. What bankers began to do since then on was very easy, to create from out of thin air a new credit. For instance, 1 million euros lent to this gentleman. And right in the asset side of the balance sheet, credit to Mr. X 1 million euros against 1 million euros of deposits in their liability side of their balance sheet. Deposit created out of thin air, which is money created by the banker. When bankers began to do that, the English citizens were in a state of despair because they could see that bubbles did continue and that the periods of irrational exuberance repeated again and again. Huge malinvestment was created, and after that, new financial crises and economic recessions arrived. Whenever a financial crisis arrived and an economic recession, people lost entirely their confidence on bankers, were to demand their gold. The gold was not there, and then we had a bank run, what we call in Spanish, una corrida bancaria. And everybody remembers the movie Mary Poppins. You might remember Mary Poppins with the two children with the 2 pennies, you know, running out of the bank, and then everybody losing the confidence of the bank. This was an example of what was being repeated again and again in the 19th century.